My life didn't fall apart with a scream. There was no confrontation, no raised voices, no dramatic moment where everything exploded. It ended quietly, in a hallway, outside a room I chose not to enter. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Not because I suspected anything, not because I was checking on her. Work had been canceled last minute, and I thought I would surprise my wife. Maybe we would have dinner together. Maybe we would talk. Maybe we would remember why we chose each other in the first place. The house was unusually quiet when I stepped inside. The lights were on, but something felt off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Like walking into a place you know well, only to realize something has shifted while you were gone. I took off my shoes slowly, without thinking. My keys made a soft sound as I placed them on the table. No response, no footsteps, no greeting. I told myself she was probably in the bedroom, maybe on a call, maybe resting. Then I noticed something that didn't belong. A pair of shoes near the hallway. Men's shoes, not mine. For a second, my brain tried to protect me. It searched for explanations. Maybe a repairman, maybe a delivery mistake. Maybe I was overthinking. The mind does that when the truth is too sharp. I walked forward carefully. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the floor itself resisted me. The door to the guest room was closed. The light underneath was on. And there was silence on the other side. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that listens. I stopped. I stood there longer than I want to admit. My hand hovered near the door, but I didn't touch it. Through the thin barrier, I could hear breathing. Two people, close, familiar. I recognized one of them immediately. My best friend. The man I trusted with my secrets. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding. The man who had sat at my table, laughed with my wife, called her family. There was no noise of guilt, no panic. Just the quiet confidence of people who believe they won't be caught. In that moment, I understood something important. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with chaos. Sometimes it arrives comfortably, believing it has earned the space it occupies. I didn't open the door. That decision changed everything. People think the strongest reaction is anger. They think shouting, breaking things, demanding explanations that's strength. But strength isn't always loud. Sometimes strength is restraint. Sometimes it's walking away with the truth already in your hands. I turned around and walked back the way I came. Slowly, silently. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. What I felt wasn't rage, it was clarity. Outside, the air felt colder than usual. I sat in my car and stared at the windshield, watching nothing in particular. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Not broken, not devastated, just distant. I didn't cry that night. Crying would come later. Instead, I replayed memories. Conversations. Moments I had ignored. The times my friends stayed a little too long. The way my wife avoided eye contact when his name came up. The subtle changes I had dismissed as stress, routine, adulthood. I realized something uncomfortable. The signs had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not confront them immediately. I would not give them the satisfaction of reaction. I would not allow emotion to hand them control. Silence would be my weapon. I returned home hours later. The house was dark. The shoes were gone. The guest room door was open, clean, untouched like nothing had happened, like I had imagined it all. My wife was asleep in our bed, peaceful, calm. I lay beside her and stared at the ceiling. She didn't wake up. She didn't sense anything wrong. That was the most painful part. Not the betrayal itself, but how easily it blended into normal life. The next morning, everything continued as usual. Breakfast, small talk, routine questions. She smiled at me. I smiled back. My friend texted me later that day, asking if I wanted to hang out sometime. I replied with one word, "Sure." From that moment on, my life split into two versions, the one they saw and the one I lived in my head. I began to observe instead of participate. I listened more. I spoke less. I watched patterns form. They thought they were safe because I was calm. They were wrong because I wasn't calm. I was awake. And once you see the truth clearly, you don't rush. You don't react. You let people reveal who they are, completely, without interruption. That night, in the hallway, didn't destroy me. It prepared me. Trust doesn't break all at once. It erodes quietly, moment by moment, memory by memory, until one day you realize it was never as solid as you believed. I had known him for over a decade. We met long before marriage, long before responsibility weighed us down. He was the kind of friend people envy, reliable, present, familiar, the one you call without hesitation, the one you defend when others question him, the one you trust around your family, especially your wife. After that night, I didn't confront him. I didn't distance myself either. I did something far more dangerous. I stayed close. I started replaying our past, not emotionally, but analytically, conversations we'd had, jokes that lingered too long, the way he spoke about loyalty, as if it were a performance rather than a principle. I noticed how often he praised my marriage, how frequently he commented on how lucky I was. At the time, I had taken it as admiration. Now I understood it was entitlement. He texted me the next day like nothing had changed. Casual words, friendly tone, no guilt leaking through the cracks. That told me something important. Whatever was happening between them wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a mistake. It was comfortable. And comfort requires time. We met for coffee later that week. Same place we always went. Same seats. Same routine. He talked about work, stress, plans for the future. I listened carefully, watching his face, his posture, the rhythm of his voice. He didn't look like a man hiding something. He looked like a man who believed he was safe. I realized then how betrayal really works. It doesn't rely on secrecy alone. It relies on familiarity, on the assumption that no one will look too closely, because no one ever has before. I asked him about my wife, casually, lightly, just enough to test the air between us. "She's doing well," he said. "You're lucky." The word lucky stayed with me longer than it should have. I nodded, smiled, took a sip of my coffee. Inside, something shifted. Not anger, not sadness, precision. From that moment on, I began paying attention to details I had once ignored. How often he showed up unannounced. How naturally he moved through my home. How he knew where things were without asking. How comfortable my wife seemed around him, in ways she hadn't been around me for a long time. Comfort is intimacy's quiet cousin. I noticed how he avoided my eyes sometimes, but not always. How his confidence dipped briefly when conversations drifted too close to boundaries. He wasn't careless. He was practiced. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because practice means repetition. I didn't ask questions. Questions warn people. Instead, I let him talk. People always reveal themselves if you give them enough space. They grow careless when they feel admired, trusted, unchallenged. He spoke about loyalty often, about how rare true friendship was, about how betrayal destroyed lives. I wondered if he believed his own words. One evening, he came over again. My wife suggested it. I agreed immediately. I wanted to see them together without the shadow of surprise. I wanted to observe what they thought was invisible. They laughed easily, shared looks that lasted just a second too long. Nothing obvious, nothing undeniable, just enough to confirm what I already knew. The most unsettling part wasn't their closeness. It was how ordinary it felt. That night, after he left, my wife asked me if everything was okay. Her voice was gentle, concerned, convincing. I told her I was just tired. She accepted that answer too quickly. That's when I understood something else. Betrayal isn't just about crossing a line. It's about how easily people lie when they believe they're entitled to the truth staying hidden. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and through it all, I remained unchanged on the surface. Same routine, same tone, same presence. Inside, I was building something quietly. I began documenting patterns, time frames, behaviors. I wasn't collecting proof for confrontation. I was collecting clarity. I needed to understand not just what they were doing, but why they believed they could. My friend grew bolder, more relaxed. He joked more freely. He spoke openly about trust, about how people often imagine problems where none exist. I watched him carefully as he said that. He didn't see a threat in me. That was his mistake. I realized that night in the hallway hadn't just revealed betrayal. It had revealed hierarchy. They believed I was beneath the truth, that I didn't need to know, that I would never see clearly enough to act. They were wrong. The friend I trusted had mistaken silence for ignorance. He believed my calm was weakness. He believed restraint meant surrender. He had no idea that silence was calculation, and calculation doesn't rush. It waits. People think betrayal begins with another person. It doesn't. It begins with distance. I used to believe I knew my wife better than anyone. We shared a life, a home, routines that felt permanent. We spoke in habits, finished each other's sentences, moved through days without effort. That's what comfort looks like before it turns into absence. After that night, I started paying attention to her in ways I never had before, not as a husband seeking closeness, but as an observer seeking truth. And truth, I learned, lives in the smallest details. She had changed long before I noticed. Conversations became shorter, eye contact less frequent, touch less natural. I had mistaken that for normal fatigue, for adulthood settling in. I had told myself love matures into quiet. What I hadn't realized was that quiet can also mean withdrawal. She spent more time on her phone, but guarded it carefully, not hiding it aggressively, just subtly. Angles, timing, silence. She smiled more often when she wasn't talking to me, laughed more freely when someone else was present, especially him. I watched how she behaved when he was around. Her posture shifted. Her voice softened. She became lighter, more present. The woman I thought I knew seemed to reappear, just not for me. That realization hurt in a way betrayal alone never could. I replayed our history together, searching for the moment things began to fracture. There was no single event, no dramatic turning point, just gradual erosion, small disappointments, unspoken resentments, expectations unmet on both sides. I wasn't innocent in the distance between us. But distance doesn't justify deception. One night, lying beside her, I listened to her breathing and wondered when we had become strangers sharing a bed. She slept easily. I did not. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of grief and detachment. I wasn't angry at her. I was disappointed. Disappointment is quieter than anger, heavier. It settles instead of explodes. She began asking questions she never used to ask, whether I was okay, whether work was stressing me, whether something was wrong. Her concern felt rehearsed, not because it wasn't genuine, but because it was selective. She wanted reassurance, not truth. I gave her neither. Instead, I mirrored her behavior. I became polite, attentive, distant. The version of myself she had already replaced in her mind. And the more I did, the more relaxed she became. That told me everything. People don't relax when they feel guilty. They relax when they feel justified. I noticed how she avoided certain topics, how quickly conversations shifted when my friend's name came up, unless he was physically present, how naturally they coordinated without speaking, shared looks, timing, awareness. They were no longer hiding. They were assuming. I realized then that betrayal isn't always fueled by desire. Sometimes it's fueled by